From the nation's capital, the Conservative Caucus presents Conservative Roundtable, an in-depth look at today's most important issues.
Welcome to Conservative Roundtable. I'm Howard Phillips, chairman of the Conservative Caucus, which sponsors these broadcasts, now being shown from coast to coast and on YouTube. Today, we are going to discuss the Supreme Court nomination of Sonia Sotomayor. And we have as our guest Manuel Miranda, who is leading the effort to deny her confirmation. Let me say, Manuel, I applaud you for your efforts. I agree with you. I've looked at her record. I think I've read everything written about her. Where is she wrong? She's for quotas. She's for Puerto Rican statehood. She is in favor of giving the vote to convicted murderers while they're still in prison. Many, many more things. She's against the death penalty. I mean, the list of areas where the stands she's taken are terrible. Puerto Rican statehood, giving Puerto Rico separate status as a state with control of the oil around the island. So what have I left out?
Well, I mean, you've left out her own self-description, that she is an avowed liberal by her own account, who believes basically in the definition that we have always come to understand as activism. She has repeatedly indicated that if left to her own devices, she would have no hesitation to rewrite the Constitution according to her empathies, according to her biases, according to her background.
One thing I neglected to mention is the gun issue. She said that the Second Amendment doesn't apply to states. Now, there are some people who say, well, the doctrine of incorporation wasn't a great idea, so maybe that's okay. But given the Heller decision, her refusal to acknowledge the right of gun ownership as an individual right is very troubling.
And just yesterday, Senator Jim DeMint of South Carolina asked her specifically whether she believed that the Second Amendment was an individual right, and she refused to answer and said that she really hadn't given it any thought. And the problem with that issue is that on the appellate court, she was restrained by a Supreme Court precedent. She was restrained by her other panelists on that case, as most appellate judges are. They're relatively restrained in what they could do. But on the Supreme Court, she will be unstoppable in changing the Constitution as we know it. And on the gun rights issue, she will be the fifth vote. So that is why many people think that that is the one issue where she could tumble, where she could be stopped on, because that, in combination with property rights, could get Western senators, including Democrats out there in Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, Nevada, Alaska, and Arkansas, to take a second look at her.
How would you compare her with Souter? More liberal, less liberal? Where would she be in agreement with him? Where would she disagree?
Well, I think she's actually going to be more, you might say, conservative or hardline on criminal cases. Having been a criminal prosecutor, she actually is relatively pro-prosecutor on that. She would pass the Nixon test on that count. Nixon chose his choices based on the criminal rights issues. And so she is probably more conservative than he is on that. But on many states' rights issues, on individual rights, civil rights, she will probably rewrite the Constitution with her liberal colleagues.
So she is, some call it a judicial activist, others call it constitutionally defiant, or
well, it's judicial usurpation.
Yeah.
And it isn't just, of course, the problem doesn't lie with her. I mean, the American people elected a president, and he is the nominator in chief. The problem with Sonia Sotomayor doesn't just lie in her. She's a product of her times. It lies in the fact that we elected a president who would nominate her, and who told us in his book. It's rare that a presidential candidate writes a book and dedicates an entire chapter to judicial nominations and selection. And he told us and warned us in that book that he believes in living Constitution jurisprudence and would name judges who follow his views of basically that the Constitution is constantly changing according to the needs of the times, polls and surveys, and even foreign law.
Well, I was just going to say, another area where she troubles me greatly is her apparent willingness to look to foreign law as something which should be part of Supreme Court decision-making.
It is a continuing and ever-expanding problem in this country that are, especially on the Supreme Court. First, the problem is that they are ignoring the text of the Constitution, ignoring the will of the people through their elected officials. For example, in Kennedy versus Louisiana, Justice Kennedy ignored the legislature of Louisiana and trumped that will by what he called evolving standards of decency. And once you get into a standard like that, you could look to your grandmother, you could look to your mother, you could look to the courts of Cyprus or the legislature of Zimbabwe for guidance, because you've opened up an enormous doorway that anything can go through.
Given the fact that the Democrats, assuming that Robert Byrd comes out of the hospital from his staph infection, supposed, will have, and if they get Franken in Minnesota, they'll have 60 votes in the Senate. How can this be stopped?
Well, I hate to tell you, I don't know that this can be stopped except in three possible ways. One is the gun rights issue alone, if allowed to continue to be debated among Democrats in the western states, could possibly stop her. The NRA has not taken a position on judges since Abner Mikva, and that is this is in a post-Heller world. This is a very live issue for them. They've been taking.
They killed the vote for D.C. in the House.
Well, they have had a defensive posture as compared to, say, for example, pro-lifers who have an activist posture. Now the NRA is going to have to rethink that posture. So that alone, and then secondly, that in combination with other issues that could arise could be a problem for her. And then lastly, she may have a very serious problem with judicial temperament. She's not Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She's not Sandra Day O'Connor. She's not John Roberts. She's not Sam Alito. She's not David Souter, who are all fairly modest and moderate in their tone before the hearings. She's more like Robert Bork.
She apparently has quite a temper.
She has a temper, and apparently she is reputed to be something of a bully. But she has, being a Hispanic, I can say this, she has that gene in her which wants you to get the last word. Hispanics are can be very argumentative when given an opportunity.
It's also argued that her command of the English language when it comes to writing is very poor, that any opinions which she might write will not be that impressive.
Well, she has written about the fact that she came to higher education with a deficit. And I can understand that. A lot of folks that go through school in this country who come from dual language experiences have that problem. And she has written that she has overcome that problem. She did graduate from Princeton and Yale with honors, so she's credentialed. That doesn't mean that she's qualified.
Yeah, I went to Harvard, and a lot of people graduated with credentials who were total dumbos.
That's right. There are many of us who graduated from these schools and would not posture ourselves up for the Supreme Court. But what may be the problem is that she may not have an evolved depth on many judicial issues. She, from my reading of her, has locked into a 1970s way of thinking, particularly with regard to racial quotas, particularly with regard to her sense that somehow her being a wise Latina woman would give her some endowment that apparently African Americans or white men would not have. That's very problematic. It suggests that she's unevolved and might have a problem with this particular court that she's likely to join, because they do have a very refined and evolved sense of these issues.
What about a filibuster? Some people say no filibuster. Others say it's possible.
It is possible. It's possible because some moderate Democrats may join. Now, it may not be what I call a democratic filibuster. That is to say, an obstructive filibuster, one intended to prevent a vote. The kind of filibuster that Democrats gave Miguel Estrada, another qualified Hispanic nominee that President Bush intended to raise to the Supreme Court, and they treated him like a dog and didn't give him a single vote. I think that that's not likely to happen to this nominee. However, the traditional filibuster is possible, and that is intended to be used when you simply want to have a 3 more days or another week or 2 more weeks of debate. And the purpose of that debate is not to obstruct. It's always to catalyze to the American people the issues that are important.
How angry are people in the Senate about Senator Leahy pushing the date to a point far earlier than they had requested?
Well, I think they are angry, and I think they should be angry. That is a failure of etiquette, but he has done this before. He has broken promises repeatedly to his colleagues over the years on these issues. I mean, and these are the kinds of things that senators do not forgive, never forget. And I think people are angry. What it will do is it will justify Republicans to not allow the nomination to go to the floor. Because what people don't realize is that in the Senate rules, in the rules of the Judiciary Committee, you need one member of the minority to approve a matter before it can go to the floor. And without Arlen Specter, now among the Republicans, Jeff Sessions has a lot more power than any chairman has had in a very long time.
We're going to take a break. We'll be right back discussing the latest events concerning President Barack Hussein Obama's nomination of Sonia Sotomayor to the membership of the U.S. Supreme Court. Stay with us.
Hi, I'm United States Representative Thaddeus McCotter from Michigan's 11th Congressional District. As we enter a new millennium of hope and peril, with so many problems besetting our country and yet so many opportunities before us, it is oftentimes tempting to think that your voice doesn't matter. What can one person do to make a difference in the life of their community and their country? Well, the first thing you can do is to contact your legislator. You are one of the sovereign citizens of the United States. You elect your servants to work for you in Congress. Let them know what you think. Send them a letter, send them an email, call them on the phone. Your voice matters, because if you don't raise your voice in the interest of our free republic, who will?
Here's how you can become a citizen lobbyist and influence how your representatives vote. Write a letter to your congressmen and senators. Speak out on a call-in talk radio program. Write a letter to the editor of your local newspaper and call the Conservative Caucus for more information at 703-938-9626.
Welcome back. I'm Howard Phillips, and our guest is Manuel Miranda, who is coordinating the opposition to Sonia Sotomayor. Let's talk abortion. Rush Limbaugh has said she might be okay on this issue, and he said that based on her conclusion in a case that George Bush had the right to withhold funding on the international scene for pro-abortion activities. On the other hand, she expressed dismay that legal services lawyers are prohibited from involvement in abortion cases. What is your take on abortion, and can any predictions be made about where she is on the issue?
Yeah, and then today there's some film that just came out that shows that she has poor views on euthanasia as well. So on issues of
Not
life,
young people in Asia, but killing old people.
That's right, not young people in Asia. No, she, the bottom line is that she is, again, of a certain generation. If anyone is going to find any solace in her writings, limited few cases on abortion, they're misguided. The bottom line is that she will join the pro-Roe majority, really, on the court. She will maintain Roe just as it is. She will not revisit it. And that is a major problem, because many of us in this country have come to vote Republican because, especially Catholics, and I'm a Catholic, and a lot of Catholics vote Republican. Reagan Democrats, a lot of those switched over to vote Republican because of the abortion issue. If you lose hope that Roe can be overturned, you could lose a lot of voters, and that has political consequences.
Well, much has been made of the fact that she is, quote unquote, a Catholic, but she's a Catholic who doesn't go to church.
Well, she went to Cardinal Spellman High School, which is ironic because Cardinal Spellman was one of the great conservative anti-communist prelates of the last century. But the times that she spent at Princeton and at Yale probably made her forget any influence that she had in her Catholic school upbringing.
Talk about, if you would, is it pronounced Ritchie, the case in Connecticut?
The Rickey case.
The Rickey case. What does that tell us about her?
Well, the Rickey case shows that, as I said...
Explain what it is.
Yeah, the Rickey case was a case where firemen were sued because they had passed with flying colors their promotion exams, and the court held that the promotions, the employers did not give them promotions, and they sued. The court held against the plaintiffs. Rickey was a young man who was dyslexic. He had studied hard. He had hired a tutor to help him prepare for this exam. He and the others did very well. They did not get the promotions. And when they sued, Sonia Sotomayor didn't even have the courtesy to write an opinion in the case, simply ruled against them in favor of upholding a determination that favored African Americans. So
in other words, their disqualification was that they were white.
That they were white, including there was one Hispanic. And that's the great irony when you start playing these racial games, that that you harm the one of basically, so to speak, her own people. But the Rickey case
they said you have to hire a black man even if he's not as well qualified as the white man.
Yeah, basically they gave none of them. What the Connecticut city did was they gave none of them promotions. In other words, they didn't, rather than give the credit to the people who had passed the exams, they decided not to give anybody a promotion that year because of the result. So that, in combination with her statements with regard to the effects of her own ethnic background and biases, makes it very problematic. Now, that case will come out at the end of this term, which means that
we'll hear that before the court reconvenes in October and before there's a vote in the Senate.
That's correct. It'll probably on the very last day of this term, on June 30th perhaps, and that means that it'll have an influence on the hearings themselves. It'll be an issue at the hearings, and especially the fact that she didn't write an opinion on it and was excoriated for it by another judge, another Hispanic judge on the Second Circuit, and a Clinton appointee.
Who was that, Cabranes?
Cabranes.
Yeah. What else would you say about this nominee that we haven't covered?
Well, this nominee is going to be there for 30 years. What has to be, talk about rejection, filibuster, talk about the issues. You might say that it's a little bit like looking at the trees and missing the forest. The bottom line is that this debate over this confirmation has to be used so as to remind the American people that it is they, with their vote, that are the ultimate stewards of the federal judiciary. To remind them, in case they didn't know it, and they didn't know it at the time, when they voted for a president and senators, they were basically saying that giving a license to this president and senators to confirm to the judiciary people who would rewrite the Constitution, people who would ignore the people's will through the legislature.
What can our viewers do to influence the outcome?
Well, they can call Senator Mitch McConnell, 202-224-3121, and ask him to engage in an unprecedented effort, the kind of effort that we saw in 2003 with Majority Leader Bill Frist, the kind of effort that will catalyze to the American people all of these issues that define and divide us as a people.
Now, Robert Bork, if I recall correctly, was questioned regarding his religious views, indirectly or directly. To what degree would it be regarded by members of the Senate Judiciary Committee as appropriate to talk to her about her religious views? For example, one of the reasons I opposed David Souter's confirmation was that he was a legal positivist. He rejected higher law. Does she support the Declaration of Independence, that we're endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights? Shouldn't that be asked of her?
These fundamental questions should be part of the hearings. We should get back to basics in educating the American people through these hearings. And perhaps her religious views are out of the question because the Constitution protects against that. Now, that didn't stop the Democrats from raising religious tests on judicial nominees of President Bush. So that is not in play. But you could certainly ask her about her philosophy and how it will influence. Because as she has acknowledged, if her background, her ethnic background, her roots will influence her decision one way or another, certainly it's fair game to ask her about her philosophy.
No question about it. Now, Jeff Sessions is playing a key role in this. He's a senator from the state of Alabama. When he was nominated to a federal judgeship, he was rejected, even by some of those who sit with him today in the Senate. And I guess that was a good thing, as God would have it, because he then became a U.S. Senator, and he's one of the better U.S. Senators. How do you feel he has been doing his job as ranking Republican on judiciary?
You know, Jeff Sessions is one of the finest men in the Senate today, not just as a senator, but as a human being. And he has been called to this service in a strange way, but he is the right man for this job. He will guarantee fair hearings, and he will also guarantee substantive hearings. He has already staffed up that committee with some of the best staff that you could get, veterans of past wars, you might say. And he himself, because of his background, is the right man for this job.
And he can't be very happy with Chairman Leahy short-sheeting him in setting the date. Clearly, Senator Sessions was not part of that decision.
Well, and it isn't just politics as usual. The bottom line is that John Roberts had 400 cases to be reviewed. This judge has 4,000 cases to be reviewed, and yet they're doing it in about the same time as John Roberts. That's not right. That isn't fair. But on the other hand, perhaps it's best that we get through this fast so that we can get to the floor where the real debate should be had.
You think there will be real debate? One last question. I was surprised and pleased that Lindsey Graham was so outspoken in his raising concerns about Sotomayor. To what do you attribute that? Well, it seems out of character.
Well, Lindsey Graham plays a John McCain game sometimes, but he's also a fine lawyer. And so he understands these issues very, very well. And although he plays politics sometimes, on this he will perform very well. And he may very well be the guy who asks her to recant her views as to whether a wise Latina woman would do a better job than a white man or even a black man.
We're going to take a break. When we come back, our distinguished guest, Manuel Miranda, will tell us more about what you can do to become knowledgeable and proficient on this issue and to take action to see to it that members of the U.S. Senate understand our concerns about where this person might stand as a member of the Supreme Court. Stay with us.
Here's how you can become a citizen lobbyist and influence how your representatives vote. Write a letter to your congressmen and senators. Speak out on a call-in talk radio program. Write a letter to the editor of your local newspaper and call the Conservative Caucus for more information at 703-938-9626.
One of the major activities of the Conservative Caucus is Constitution education. We want to help raise up a new generation of leaders who understand the underlying principles of the Constitution and the meaning of its key provisions. Through programs such as Conservative Roundtable, through mailings, workshops, conferences, seminars, we strive to communicate the legacy of the Founding Fathers. Each year we commemorate Constitution Day, September 17th. We publish newsletters, action bulletins, and other materials to promote an understanding of and fidelity to the Constitution, and we work with members of Congress who share our vision and share our concern. We hope you will decide to work with us as well by becoming a supporter of the Conservative Caucus.
www.conservativeusa.org, 703-938-9626.
Welcome back. I am Howard Phillips, chairman of the Conservative Caucus, which sponsors Conservative Roundtable. You can watch this program on YouTube. if it's not in your community, and we're in communities from coast to coast. If you're interested in the kinds of issues we cover on Conservative Roundtable, I hope you will contact us at www.conservativeusa.org or fax us your contact information at 703-281-4108 or snail mail us at 450 Maple Avenue East, Vienna, Virginia 22180. And it won't cost you anything, but we'd love to be in touch with you. Lest I forget, let me urge you to contact your two United States senators concerning Sonia Sotomayor. Having heard this program, I'm sure you share my concern about the prospect of her serving on the U.S. Supreme Court. Manuel Miranda, you're leading the coalition of concern about Sonia. Tell us a little bit about what your coalition is doing and advise our viewers what they ought to be doing.
Well, we are working hard to motivate our Republican senators, and especially the leadership, to make sure that this does not that it is not treated like the Ginsburg and Breyer nominations, where they flew through the Senate without any debate or scrutiny.
3 Republicans opposed Ginsburg, if I recall.
That's
correctly.
right, and a similar number opposed Breyer. So in that situation, there was almost no debate, no scrutiny. In this situation, there has to be great effort and great scrutiny and debate on the Senate floor, because that is what causes the press to write about it, to pay attention to it, and we need that. Otherwise, we will continue to, I think, lose elections.
And there will be more nominees.
There will be more nominees, and that, by the way, there could very well be another Supreme Court vacancy as soon as 4 weeks from now.
Would that be Ruth Ginsburg?
Justice Ginsburg is not in good health. It's very, very possible that we have another opening just in a few weeks.
Manuel Miranda, thank you so much for the work you do. Thanks for watching us on Conservative Roundtable. Contact your senators. The switchboard is 202-224-3121. You can reach any member of the Senate by calling that number. Please do it. We need your help.